The cabin door stood ajar when Silas Stone Harding returned from checking his trap lines, and his blood ran cold. He had left at dawn, planning to be back within hours, but a broken snare had delayed him, and now it was past noon. His 6-month-old son Caleb had been sleeping peacefully when Silas departed, but the baby had been increasingly fussy lately, refusing the goat's milk Silas had been desperately trying to get him to take. Ever since Silas's wife Mary had died birthing Caleb, the mountain man had been struggling to keep his son alive, watching helplessly as the infant grew thinner and weaker, his cries more plaintive. Silas burst through the door, his hand instinctively moving to the knife at his belt, prepared to face whatever intruder had violated his home. But the scene that greeted him stopped him in his tracks, rendering him motionless with shock and confusion. A young woman sat in Mary's rocking chair by the fireplace, holding Caleb against her breast. The baby was nursing contentedly, his tiny hands kneading against her soft flesh, making the small, satisfied sounds that Silas had not heard from his son in weeks. The woman was perhaps 17 or 18 years old, with a round, soft face framed by tangled auburn hair. She was substantially overweight, her body filling the rocking chair completely, her dress torn and dirty, straining at the seams. But what struck Silas most was the expression on her face as she gazed down at Caleb. It was pure tenderness, mixed with profound sadness and something that looked like desperate gratitude. She looked up at the sound of Silas's entrance, her eyes widening with fear. "Please don't hurt me," she said quickly, her voice trembling. "I heard him crying from the woods, crying like he was dying. I came to see if I could help, and when I saw he was so hungry, I couldn't let him starve." Silas stood frozen, his mind struggling to process what he was seeing. This stranger, this girl, was feeding his son with her own milk, which meant, "You have a baby?" he asked, his voice rough from disuse. He rarely spoke anymore, living alone in these mountains with only Caleb for company. Pain flashed across the girl's face. "I did," she whispered. "Born 3 weeks ago. She died 2 days later. I still have milk, and when I heard your baby crying—" She trailed off, fresh tears spilling down her round cheeks. "I'm sorry for intruding. I know it's improper, but he was so hungry, and I could help. I had to help." Silas looked at his son, really looked at him, and saw what he had been too desperate and exhausted to see before Caleb looked better than he had in days. His cheeks had more color, his breathing was easier, and he was nursing with an enthusiasm that spoke of a deep, satisfied hunger finally being met. The baby had been dying slowly, and they both knew it. Goat's milk was not enough. He needed human milk, and this strange, unexpected girl was providing exactly what he needed to survive. "What's your name?" Silas asked, lowering his hand from his knife and stepping further into the cabin. "Bessie," the girl said. "Bessie May Putterman, though most folks call me Blossom on account of my mama. Said I was like a flower that bloomed when I smiled." She smiled tentatively at Silas, and he could see what her mother had meant when she smiled. Her whole face transformed, becoming almost pretty, despite the tear tracks and dirt. "I ran away from my father's homestead 3 days ago. He was planning to trade me to a prospector for 2 bottles of whiskey and a bag of flour. Said I was too fat to be of any use otherwise." Rage flared in Silas's chest at the casual cruelty of a father willing to trade his own child like livestock. He understood desperation. God knew he had felt enough of it since Mary's death. But there were lines a man did not cross, and selling your daughter was one of them. "Where were you going?" he asked, his voice gentler now. Bessie's smile faded. "I don't know. Anywhere that wasn't there. I was following the creek, hoping to find a settlement or maybe another homestead where I could work for my keep. Then I heard your baby crying, and I followed the sound here." She looked down at Caleb again, her expression softening. "He's beautiful. What's his name?" "Caleb," Silas said, "after my grandfather." He paused, then added, "My wife Mary died bringing him into the world. I've been trying to keep him alive on goat's milk, but he's been failing. I thought—" He couldn't finish the sentence, couldn't voice the terrible fear that had haunted him for weeks, that he was going to lose his son the same way he had lost his wife. "He's not failing any more," Bessie said softly. "He's a strong little fighter. He just needed the right food." Silas watched them for a long moment, this strange girl who had appeared like an answer to his most desperate prayers, holding his son like he was precious, giving him the one thing Silas could not provide. He was a practical man, hardened by years in the mountains and recent grief, but he was not so hardened that he could not recognize a gift when it was offered. "Stay," he said abruptly. Bessie's head snapped up, her eyes wide with shock. "What?" "Stay here," Silas repeated. "You need shelter and protection. Caleb needs what you can give him. We can help each other. You feed my son, and I'll give you a safe place to live. Fair trade." "But people will talk," Bessie said, though hope was already dawning in her eyes. "A young woman living with a widowed man, it's not proper." "I don't care about proper," Silas interrupted. "I care about keeping my son alive. And from what you've told me, you care more about survival than propriety, too. We can work out the details, but the offer stands. You're welcome in my home for as long as you need, no strings attached, except that you feed Caleb when he's hungry." Bessie looked down at the baby in her arms, then back at Silas. Slowly, she nodded. "All right," she whispered. "I'll stay. Thank you. You don't know what this means to me." "I think I do," Silas said quietly. "You lost your baby. Feeding mine probably helps with the grief. Same as having you here helps me keep Caleb alive. We're both getting something we need." Over the following days, an unexpected routine developed in the isolated mountain cabin. Bessie proved to be far more capable than her youth and circumstances suggested. She cleaned the cabin with a thoroughness that made Silas realize how much he had let things slide in his grief and exhaustion. She cooked meals that actually tasted good, using the limited supplies Silas had on hand with creativity and skill. She tended the small vegetable garden Mary had started, coaxing life from plants Silas had all but abandoned, and most importantly, she cared for Caleb with a devotion that was almost maternal, nursing him regularly, changing him, bathing him, singing to him in a surprisingly sweet voice. For his part, Silas found himself watching Bessie with growing respect. She moved through the cabin with quiet efficiency despite her size, never complaining about the hard work or the rustic conditions. She had been through terrible things: her baby's death, her father's betrayal, days alone in the wilderness. But she had not been broken by them. Instead, she seemed to find purpose in caring for Caleb, healing her own grief by nurturing another woman's child. Silas had constructed a makeshift bedroom for Bessie by hanging blankets to section off a corner of the cabin, giving her privacy. He was scrupulously careful never to intrude on her space or make her feel threatened. He had given his word that there were no strings attached to his offer, and he meant it. He might be rough and isolated, but he was a man of honor. One evening, about a week after Bessie's arrival, as they sat by the fire after supper with Caleb sleeping peacefully in his cradle, Bessie spoke quietly. "I want to thank you properly for taking me in. You saved my life, Mr. Harding. I was going to die out there in those woods, I know it. And instead, I'm here, safe and warm and useful. I haven't felt useful in I can't remember how long." "Call me Silas," he said gruffly, "or Stone, if you prefer. Most folks use that name on account of how I look like I'm carved from granite." He paused, then added, "And you're more than useful, Bessie. You're keeping Caleb alive. That's everything to me." "He's a good baby," Bessie said, looking at the sleeping infant with obvious affection. "He reminds me of my little Rose. She had his same serious expression, like she was thinking deep thoughts." Her voice broke slightly. Do you think it's wrong that feeding Caleb helps me feel less empty inside? Like by keeping him alive, I'm honoring Rose's memory?" "No," Silas said firmly. "I don't think that's wrong at all. I think you're giving Caleb life, and that's the most honorable thing a person can do. Your Rose would be proud of her mama." Bessie wiped tears from her eyes and smiled. "Thank you for saying that, and thank you for not treating me like I'm disgusting, for not making me feel ashamed of my size. My father always said I was fat as a house, that no man would ever want me, that I was only good for hard labor. But you treat me like I'm a real person." "You are a real person," Silas said, surprised that this even needed to be stated. "A person's worth isn't measured by their size or their looks. It's measured by their character and their actions. And your character and actions have saved my son's life. That makes you valuable beyond measure in my eyes." Their quiet peace was shattered 2 weeks later when Bessie's father tracked her to Silas's cabin. Jedediah Putterman arrived with Deputy Miller from the nearest settlement, claiming Bessie was his property and demanding her return. The confrontation happened in the clearing outside the cabin, with Bessie watching fearfully from the doorway, holding Caleb protectively. "That's my daughter," Jedediah shouted, pointing at Bessie with a gnarled finger. "She ran off and left me without help on my homestead. She's coming back with me where she belongs." "She's not going anywhere," Silas said, his voice dangerously quiet. He stood between Jedediah and the cabin, his muscular frame tense and ready for violence if necessary. "Bessie is under my protection now." "Protection?" Jedediah sneered. "More like you've taken advantage of a simple-minded girl for your own purposes. Everyone knows what's going on up here. You've got my daughter living in sin, pretending to be nursemaid to your brat so you can have your way with her." Silas's hands clenched into fists, but he kept his voice controlled. "What's going on here is that Bessie is caring for my infant son, who would be dead without her help. She's a member of my household, and she's staying of her own free will. You have no claim on her." Deputy Miller shifted uncomfortably. He was a weak man, easily swayed by whoever spoke loudest, but even he could see the situation was morally complex. "Mr. Harding, Miss Bessie is technically under her father's authority until she marries. If he wants her to come home—" "I don't want to go home," Bessie said loudly, stepping out of the cabin despite her fear. Caleb was awake now, fussing in her arms, and she held him close like a shield. "My father was going to sell me to a prospector for whiskey. He doesn't care about me. He just wants me back so he has someone to do his work. I'm staying here with Silas and Caleb. This is my home now." "You don't have a choice, girl," Jedediah spat. "You're my daughter, and you'll do as I say." "Actually, she does have a choice," a new voice said. Everyone turned to see a Ute woman emerging from the tree line, moving with silent grace. She was perhaps 40 years old, with weathered features and intelligent eyes. "I am Lone Willow. I have been watching this homestead since the girl arrived, making sure she was safe. I have seen how Mr. Harding treats her with respect and kindness. I have seen how she cares for his child with love and devotion. This is a family, not a sin. A squaw's opinion means nothing," Jedediah said dismissively, but Deputy Miller held up a hand. "Miss Lone Willow's word carries weight in these parts," he said. "She's helped settle disputes before. If she says the girl is being treated properly—" He looked at Bessie, really looked at her, and seemed to see for the first time that she was healthier and happier than he remembered from previous encounters. "Miss Bessie, do you truly want to stay here?" "I do," Bessie said firmly. "Silas has been nothing but kind and respectful to me. He gave me shelter when I had nowhere to go. And Caleb needs me. He's thriving now because I can feed him properly. If you make me leave, you'll be condemning this baby to death. Is that really what the law requires?" Deputy Miller looked deeply uncomfortable. I suppose not. If you're here willingly and Mr. Harding isn't forcing you to do anything improper." He turned to Jedediah. "I'm sorry, but I don't think I can force your daughter to return with you if she doesn't want to come." "This is an outrage," Jedediah bellowed. "She's my property." "She's not property," Silas said coldly. "She's a human being with her own will, and she's chosen to stay with me and Caleb. Now get off my land before I throw you off." For a moment, it looked like Jedediah might try to take Bessie by force, but one look at Silas's powerful frame and the cold determination in his eyes convinced him otherwise. With a final string of curses, he stormed off, leaving Deputy Miller to follow sheepishly behind. After they left, Bessie collapsed into Silas's arms, sobbing with relief. He held her awkwardly, unsure how to comfort her, but his presence seemed to be enough. Lone Willow approached quietly. "You have made enemies," she said to Silas. "Jedediah Putterman will spread lies about what happens in this cabin. The white people in the settlement will believe him because they want to believe the worst." "Let them believe what they want," Silas said. "I know the truth, and so does Bessie." "The truth matters less than perception," Lone Willow said wisely. "But I will speak for you when the lies spread, and I will watch over this place to make sure Jedediah does not try to take the girl by force." True to Lone Willow's prediction, rumors spread through the settlement like wildfire. The story that circulated was not one of a desperate girl finding shelter and a dying baby being saved, but of a widowed mountain man keeping a young woman as his concubine under the guise of child care. When Silas made his monthly trip to the settlement for supplies 3 weeks later, bringing Bessie and Caleb with him, the reaction was immediate and hostile. Women pulled their children away from Bessie as if she carried plague. Men made crude jokes just loud enough for Silas to hear. The shopkeeper, who had always been cordial, treated them with cold disdain. And Reverend Thaddeus, the settlement's self-appointed moral authority, confronted them directly outside the general store. "Mr. Harding," the Reverend said, his voice dripping with false concern, I've heard troubling things about your living arrangements. It's inappropriate for an unmarried woman to live in your home, especially one so young. For the sake of propriety and the girl's immortal soul, I must insist that Miss Putterman be removed to a more suitable situation." "And what situation would that be?" Silas asked coldly. "Should I send her back to a father who tried to sell her for whiskey? Should I turn her out into the wilderness, where she'll likely die? Or should I just let my son starve because feeding him with wet nurse's milk is improper?" "There are proper channels for such things," Reverend Thaddeus said stiffly. "The church has facilities." "Your church is 50 miles away, and it doesn't have a wet nurse," Silas interrupted. "Bessie does. She's keeping Caleb alive, and that's all that matters to me. What you or anyone else thinks about it is irrelevant." "Mr. Harding, I must warn you that if you continue in this sinful arrangement, you and Miss Putterman will not be welcome in this community. Your immortal souls are in jeopardy." Bessie, who had been silent until now, spoke up with surprising strength. "Reverend, when I was wandering the woods 3 weeks ago, starving and desperate, your church didn't find me. When my baby died and I wanted to die too, your prayers didn't comfort me. Silas gave me shelter and purpose. Caleb gave me a reason to keep living. If that's sin in your eyes, then I'll gladly be a sinner." A few people in the growing crowd actually applauded, though most looked scandalized. Reverend Thaddeus's face turned red with indignation. "You'll regret those words, young lady." "The only thing I regret," Bessie said clearly, "is that it took me so long to find people who see me as more than a burden. Silas and Caleb are my family now. That's not sin. That's salvation." They left the settlement quickly after that. Their supplies gathered despite the hostile atmosphere. On the ride back to the cabin, Bessie was quiet, clearly shaken by the confrontation. Caleb dozed peacefully in her arms, blissfully unaware of the controversy surrounding his care. "I'm sorry," Silas said gruffly. "I didn't think it would be that bad." "It's not your fault," Bessie replied. "People see what they want to see. We know the truth that you're a good man who's trying to keep his son alive, and I'm a girl who found purpose when she thought her life was over. That's all that matters." But the town's hostility had consequences. When Caleb fell ill with a raging fever 2 weeks later, and Silas rode to town to fetch the doctor, he was met with refusal. Dr. Henshaw, under pressure from Reverend Thaddeus and other moral authorities, declined to treat the child of a household living in sin. Desperate and furious, Silas returned home empty-handed to find Bessie in tears, holding a limp, burning Caleb. "He's getting worse," she sobbed. "I don't know what to do. I've been giving him cool baths and trying to get him to nurse, but he's so weak." Lone Willow appeared at their door as if summoned, carrying a leather bag of herbs and remedies. "I heard you went to town for the doctor," she said. "I knew they would refuse you, so I have brought what I can offer." Together, the three of them worked through the night to bring down Caleb's fever. Lone Willow made poultices and teas from her healing herbs. Bessie held the baby's skin to skin, using her body heat to regulate his temperature. Silas paced like a caged wolf, feeling helpless and terrified. He had already lost Mary. He could not lose Caleb, too. By dawn, the fever had broken. Caleb was weak, but nursing again, his little hand clutching Bessie's finger as he fed. All three adults collapsed in exhausted relief, Silas finding himself clasping both Bessie's and Lone Willow's hands in gratitude. "Thank you," he said hoarsely. Both of you. You saved his life." "We are family," Lone Willow said simply. "That is what family does." The word struck Silas deeply. Family. He looked at Bessie, who was gazing at Caleb with such profound love and relief, and realized the truth he had been avoiding for weeks. She was not just the wet nurse who was keeping his son alive. She was not just the girl he had offered shelter. She had become essential to him in ways that went beyond practical necessity. She had brought life back to his home, warmth to the cold spaces Mary's death had left, and more than that, he had come to care for her gentleness, her strength, her refusal to be broken by the cruelties life had dealt her. "Bessie," he said quietly, "I need to tell you something." She looked up, her round face tired but radiant in the early morning light. "What is it?" "When I asked you to stay, I said there were no strings attached. That's still true. You can leave whenever you want, and I'll make sure you have the resources to start fresh somewhere else. But," he paused, choosing his words carefully, "but I hope you won't leave, not because Caleb needs you, though he does, but because I need you. You've become part of this family, Bessie, and I think maybe I'm falling in love with you." Bessie's eyes widened with shock, then filled with tears. "You can't mean that. I'm fat and plain, and I'm just the girl who showed up to feed your baby. You're only saying this because you're grateful. I'm saying it because it's true," Silas interrupted firmly. "You're not just anything, Bessie May Putterman. You're strong and kind and beautiful in ways that have nothing to do with your size. You've made this cabin feel like a home again. You've given Caleb life and me hope. If you don't feel the same way, I understand, but I needed you to know how I feel." "I do feel the same way," Bessie whispered. "I've been falling in love with you too, but I was afraid to say anything. Afraid you'd send me away for being improper, or afraid you were just being kind to the pathetic fat girl who had nowhere else to go." "You're not pathetic," Silas said, moving closer and taking her free hand while she held Caleb with the other. "You're magnificent, and if you'll have me, I'd like to marry you properly. Make you Caleb's mother-in-law as well as in heart. Give the town something real to gossip about instead of their ugly lies." Bessie laughed through her tears. "Yes," she said simply. "Yes, I'll marry you, Silas Harding. I can't think of anything I want more." Lone Willow smiled and nodded approvingly. "This is good," she said. "Love that grows from need and respect is strong love. You will be happy together." They married a month later in a simple ceremony at the cabin, with Lone Willow as witness and Caleb as an unwitting participant, nursing contentedly in his mother's arms throughout the vows. Silas had initially planned to have the wedding in town at the church, wanting to do things properly, but Reverend Thaddeus had refused to perform the ceremony, calling it a farce meant to legitimize sin. Instead, they found an itinerant preacher passing through who was happy to marry them for a modest fee and a hot meal. He was an old man with kind eyes who said he had seen enough of life to know that love came in unexpected packages and should be celebrated wherever it was found. When Silas kissed his bride, his first kiss since Mary's death, Bessie's first kiss ever, he felt something inside him unlock, a grief and loneliness that had been holding him prisoner, finally beginning to release. Bessie kissed him back with sweet enthusiasm, and Caleb chose that moment to let out a contented sigh, making everyone laugh. But their happiness was interrupted one final time when Jedediah Putterman showed up drunk at their cabin 3 weeks after the wedding, ranting about his daughter being a whore and demanding money for the loss of her labor. He was incoherent and belligerent, and when he tried to force his way inside, Silas physically removed him from the property. "You touched my wife again," Silas said, his voice deadly calm, "and I'll make sure you regret it. Bessie is married now. She's no longer under your authority, and you have no claim on her or her time. Leave and don't come back." What happened next would become legend in the settlement. Caleb, who had been sleeping peacefully inside, began to cry. Bessie immediately went to him, and her voice singing a lullaby drifted out through the cabin window, sweet and clear. The sound seemed to cut through Jedediah's drunken rage, and something in his face crumpled. "That's how Alara used to sing," he mumbled, referring to Bessie's late mother. "Just like that." He looked at Bessie through the window, really looked at her, and seemed to see for the first time what he had thrown away. "I loved your mama," he said, his voice breaking. "After she died, I couldn't look at you without seeing her. You have her voice, her kindness. And I treated you like garbage because I couldn't stand being reminded of what I'd lost." "That's not my fault, Papa," Bessie said firmly, though her eyes were wet with tears. "Losing Mama hurt me too, but I didn't take it out on you. You had a choice in how you treated me, and you chose cruelty." Jedediah nodded slowly, tears cutting tracks through the grime on his face. I know I got no right to ask, but can you ever forgive me?" Bessie was quiet for a long moment, holding Caleb close, feeling the warmth and weight of the life she was building despite her father's attempts to destroy her. "Maybe someday," she said finally, "but not today. Today, I need you to leave and let me be happy. I have a family now, people who value me. Don't take that away from me." Jedediah nodded again and stumbled away into the darkness. They never saw him again, though Lone Willow reported months later that he had died drunk in a snowstorm, frozen to death while trying to walk home from the settlement saloon. The following summer, when Caleb was a healthy, thriving toddler and Bessie was heavily pregnant with their first child together, something unexpected happened. Reverend Thaddeus appeared at their cabin looking older and humbled. "Mrs. Harding," he said, addressing Bessie formally, "I've come to apologize. It's taken me far too long to realize how wrong I was about you and your husband. I heard how the town doctor refused to treat your son, and I'm ashamed to say I supported that decision at the time. Then my own grandson fell ill, and Dr. Henshaw treated him without question because my family is respectable. The hypocrisy of it struck me profoundly." He paused, removing his hat. "Lone Willow told me how you three saved Caleb's life when the doctor and I failed you. She told me about the love and care in this home, about how you've not only survived but thrived despite the town's judgment. I was wrong to condemn you, and I'm sorry. I'd like to make amends if you'll let me." Bessie looked at Silas, who nodded slightly, leaving the decision to her. She turned back to Reverend Thaddeus and said, "I appreciate your apology, Reverend. It takes courage to admit when you're wrong, but words are easy. If you truly want to make amends, speak the truth about us in town. Tell people that we're a family built on love and respect, not sin. Help change the story they tell about us." "I will," Reverend Thaddeus promised. "Starting this Sunday, I'll preach about judging righteously rather than by appearances, about how love and family can take many forms. I'll use your story as an example of what I should have supported instead of condemned. True to his word, Reverend Thaddeus became an advocate for the Harding family. Slowly, gradually, the town's attitude began to shift. People who had shunned Bessie began greeting her politely in the street. Women asked her advice about nursing and child care. Men sought Silas's counsel on mountain survival. The family was being accepted not despite their unconventional beginning, but because people were finally seeing the truth of what they had built. When Bessie gave birth to a healthy daughter they named Mary, after Silas's first wife, the settlement held a celebration. Women brought gifts and food. Men helped Silas with his late summer chores so he could stay close to home with his growing family. Even Deputy Miller, who had once questioned Bessie's right to stay with Silas, came by with a hand-carved cradle for the baby. "Seems we all judged you too quickly," he said awkwardly. "You've built something real here, something good. The town's better for having you as part of it." On a cool autumn evening, as the aspens turned gold on the mountainsides, the Harding family sat together on their cabin porch. Silas held baby Mary while Bessie nursed little Caleb one last time before fully weaning him. Lone Willow sat nearby, smoking her pipe and watching the sunset with the contentment of someone who had found her chosen family. "Do you ever think about how unlikely all this was?" Bessie asked Silas softly. "That day I stumbled onto your cabin, starving and desperate, and found your baby crying for help. If I had gone a different direction, if you had come home 10 minutes earlier or later, then we wouldn't be here," Silas finished, "and my life would be immeasurably poorer. I thank God every day that you followed Caleb's cries, that you had the courage to help a stranger's baby, that you gave me the gift of staying." "You gave me gifts, too," Bessie said, leaning against his solid warmth. "You saw me when I thought I was invisible. You valued me when I thought I was worthless. You loved me when I thought I was unlovable. You turned what should have been the worst time of my life into the beginning of the best part." Lone Willow spoke up, her voice carrying the wisdom of years. "This is how families should be built, not on obligation or convention, but on need that becomes respect, that becomes love. You three found each other when you all needed saving. Now you have become each other's salvation." "Three?" Bessie questioned with a smile. "What about you, Lone Willow? You're part of this family, too." The Ute woman smiled, a rare and beautiful expression. "Yes," she agreed, "I am, and it is good." As the stars began to appear in the darkening sky and the mountain air grew crisp with the promise of winter, the Harding family, chosen and cherished, unconventional and unbreakable, settled into the peace they had fought so hard to claim. What had begun with a desperate girl hearing a crying baby had become a story of redemption, acceptance, and love that would be told for generations. Bessie, the girl her father had tried to sell for whiskey, had become a beloved wife and mother. Silas, the widowed mountain man who thought he would never love again, had found a partner who complemented and completed him. Caleb, the baby who had nearly died for lack of milk, thrived under the care of a mother who loved him as fiercely as if she had borne him herself. And Lone Willow, the outsider who had watched over them all, had found the family her own people had never given her. Their cabin in the mountains became a beacon of hope and acceptance, a place where people knew that love was not limited by convention, that family was not defined by blood, and that the most unlikely beginnings could lead to the most beautiful endings. And when Bessie sang her children to sleep each night, her sweet voice carrying through the pines, everyone who heard it knew they were listening to the sound of healing, of second chances, of a love that had saved them all.